Hello. Having just finished No Retreat, which I really enjoyed, ended in 1945, when the Russians managed to successfully capture Berlin, although they were behind on victory points. I think that was probably suboptimal play by me as the German. But I'm due to play it again in a face-to-face in a few weeks, so it was good preparation for that. Sticking with the East Front theme, many years ago I bought a copy of Star Rising by MMP, designed by Masahiro Yamazaki. There's not many of his games, I think, available in English. I think he's done a few more which haven't been translated. He did a game called War for the Motherland, which is essentially the precursor for this, and quite excited when this came out, because I think I'd got rid of the Russian campaign, which was fine when it was the sort of only party in town back in the 70s. I tried Russian Besiege, which didn't add much to the Russian campaign as far as I was concerned. It was a slightly different take, but nominally the same kind of engine as the Russian campaign, so I got rid of those two. I still have a fondness for Proud Monster. If you see my top 10 games and some of the, I think one of the videos covers one of my recent playthroughs. So that's a keeper for me. No Retreat, that last playthrough has confirmed its place in my collection. I don't think there are any other solely Eastern Front games. There's a few of the strategic games that you can play the East Front scenario, things like Advanced European Theatre of Operations, Unconditional Surrender, and those kind of things, but not focusing just on the East Front. So the third one I've got is actually Russia Besiege, which is Red Star Rising, which I played a bit when I first had it, and I was surprised at how easily the Germans seemed to be winning. And I thought, oh, it's just my poor Russian play at the time. But then reading the threads and doing a bit of homework, it came to light that this was actually the general consensus, is that the game is, don't want to use the word broken, but I mean it's very, very pro-German once you know what you're doing. You can essentially pin the Russian armies, because you have to pay movement points to exit Azov, which is I think +3. Russian armies have only got 3, so apart from in the winter turns, they essentially get held in place, and then the mobile forces of the Germans can surround them, and they get out of supply, and it all gets quite horrible quite quickly. So I did played some games with Jim Laufenberger on Vassal, who had the same feeling as I did, and we knocked around some house rules to try and breathe some life back into the game. I think that worked pretty well from memory. And then another guy, Jason, had some other house rules he wanted to try. And we had a very good game with those, which I think that was largely covered on Consim World. Lots of attached JPEGs showing positions and thoughts on gameplay. I noticed there was another sheet which has been, apparently came from Consim, which is another slight tweak on the basic rules. Essentially it changes the sequence of play for snow turns, because normally the Russians have combat and then move. In the snow turns now they can actually move and have combat, which gives them more flexibility to launch assaults. And the other big change was that the German battle groups, which are essentially a broken down corps, so Panzer Corps and Infantry Corps can split into two battle groups, and they had more movement and had full Zocs in the original game, and these were the things that used to swarm over the map, and the mechanised ones could even go from Zoc to Zoc, which meant that the Russian positions were just totally untenable. So this was brought in a rule that the German battle groups only have light Zocs, which essentially stop supply but don't affect movement. I thought, well, that might be an interesting twist, but then reading on further it said that two of these battle groups stacked together go back to having a normal Zoc. Well, the thing is, you can break a full battle group down into two half battle groups, which are still battle groups. So presumably you would just break down your Panzer battle group into two smaller battle groups and go back to having a Zoc, which just means you're playing games again with the system, trying to break stuff down into as many groups as possible. So I'm not sure that really works. So I set this up with a view to playing with these rules, but now I'm sort of veering away from that particular operation. So I think I may just go back and try the rules that I used, which I sort of put together in a single sheet. Red Star Rising House Rules version 5. And these did things like they gave the Russians a little bit of flexibility. In so much as that during the mud turns the German tanks can't go from Zoc to Zoc, which helps them quite a lot actually. It means that their front lines can be a little more solid when they're not being constantly outflanked. One of the things that I used to find strange was that in a snow turn you had a +3 DRM in combat. I don't know if you know the game, but it's a single D6 roll, and typically you get A1s and D1s and no effects on your DE in that first band of 6 results. The DRMs can take you from 7 up to 10, and they're essentially all attrition results. So they're 1, 2, 1, 1. You get a few DEs with the higher odds columns, but it means you're lifted off the bottom of the D6 range if you get some pluses. So the German rolls, which get the +3, as do the Russian rolls in the original as written rules, they seem to actually benefit from the +3. So, for example, if you were attacking at 2 to 1 against in the clear, whereas on a normal turn the first 3 results would be A1, A1, no effect. Well, those 3 results now can't happen in snow, so the worst result you're going to get is a D1. If you roll a 1 you get D1, D1, D2, and then you get some attrition results. And I remember once when I was approaching the outskirts of Rostov thinking, well, I won't attack now, I'll wait for the snow because that's going to increase my chances, which surely can't be right. And I did notice in the other rules, which I'm not going to use, they're talking about dropping the +3 for the first winter and the +1 for the second winter, and just if you roll a 5 or a 6 you get a step loss with the Germans, and if you roll a 6 in the second winter you get a step loss with the Germans. So that's I guess that's another potential fix. but I just kept the +3 for the Russians in my original rules, except if they were fighting the Finns, and then you got a +1. So maybe I could sort of interpose that other rule into my set. I quite like the 5 or 6, giving you a loss in the first winter, because otherwise they're not really being penalised as I could see it in the original rule. In fact, you can argue they were getting a benefit, which is just not right. So I think I'm going to use my house rules. I did go through them when I first tried it, and I got up to right up until the end. I think I played it through to the end of the game, and there's a German minor win that just sneaked above the barrier for the draw. And the other thing I found in the original game was you've got a nice pool of Russian leaders that just never really enter the game, because you get them if the German fails to conquer enough Russian assets, be they factories or mines or oil facilities. So they collect those, and as the dates march on, you get a target, and if you haven't hit the target, then the Russians can draw a leader out of the pot. But these numbers seem to go up and down. There doesn't seem to be any logical sense, at least to my mind, as to why there'd be such a great sort of variety of numbers going both ways as time progresses. So I brought in a system of gradually ascending numbers, which it made more sense to me, and the concept of leader points. So by the amount that the Germans were under the target, you would accrue leader points, and when you get 6, you can cash them in for a leader. And that seemed to work okay. So I'm probably going to stick with that, and we'll just see how we do. I don't know if this game's still being played very much. I suspect it's lost its fan base a little bit. I mean, I think Compass are doing a War for the Motherland 2. Very difficult to get in details on it. For what I can see, it looks similar. Very samey looking CRT. So it may still have some of the slightly odd rules in it, which like the +3 for the Germans in the winter and that sort of thing. So, but time will tell. But I'll show you around the map, and hopefully I'll post some progress on this. One of the nice things it does do, actually, it does cover the Finnish front, sort of north of Leningrad, if you play the full Monty scenario. And I like the sort of chit pool for the Russian armies. Essentially, you have a draw deck of strength chits, which gradually evolves as the game progresses. The worst ones, the ones with a black stripe, gradually they get withdrawn, and you seed the draw pool with better chits. So if you could get there, you could end up with quite a decent army, but you just never got there with the rules as written. I'm convinced, as are many others, that as published, it's a complete certainty, barring ridiculously bad rolls. But I mean, even with a very bad luck, I still couldn't really see the Germans losing. So let's have a look around the map, and you'll get to see what it looks like. South. So here is Odessa. The Romanian and German forces can't move on turn 1, but they'll soon get into the action. And here is the the turn record track, and you'll see the little orange number, or the 1 above the 5. That is the economic asset target. And if the Germans reach or breach that number, then the Russians don't get a leader. So you'll see it sort of goes 1, then 3, then 5. Okay, that's making sense. 8, then 2, 12, 10, 4. I mean, don't know. What's going on? Don't understand. Surely as the Germans drive east, that number should be gradually increasing. Just don't get it. So I've done my own, for better or for worse. Army groups south, centre and north. You'll see there are supply depots which are key to keeping the German spearheads going. Most of these a lot of these frontline Russian units are going to be marked out of supply. Haven't done that yet, so you can see them. So they're essentially going to be half strength. Will be prone to being overrun with a +1 DRM. So a 6 will result in a German loss. So they'll expect to take a few losses, just to punch some holes, and then they'll be attacking, and they'll be able to kill because the Russians can't retreat through a non-contested ZOC. So up here is Leningrad. You can see, stand back a bit, you can see the extent of the Finnish front. I'm not convinced that a huge amount goes on there, but those German icons, they are actually supply sources. So as far as I'm aware, you can actually introduce a supply depot at those supply sources. And you need to push on with as Murmansk and Archangel, which have got ports in them, which are economic assets which you're trying to isolate. So there are things to be gained committing some forces there. And you can get around the back of Lake Ladoga. The Finns will be pushing on there. The one interesting thing with the game is there are no replacements. Yeah, not one. So any losses that the Germans suffer are there for good. You get reinforcements, so all these guys are going to come in, but as I say, there are no replacements. When it's gone, it's gone. And here's my homegrown alternative turn record track. You can see the numbers actually ascending. Some of them have got 2, and that represents the contribution from the port. So, for example, on the turn 21, the target there is 18. If the Germans have managed to isolate the ports, then you'll lose up to 3, because the target will be 15. It just gives a bit more differentiation between the assets. There's a few other little tweaks with mines and stuff which I've introduced to give it a bit more flavour. We're not, let's say, all pretty much on a single sheet. And I found I did get a few leaders coming into the game with that setting for those economic targets. And spin around here. So you can see all these targets. You've got factories, you've got mines, oil plants, oil pipeline, all the way across. And here is the Russian army to come on. So they start with no armies, only corps in the game. So those Cs are the 1st Infantry Armies, and you'll see the Cs here, that's what's in the draw pile, that lot. And as time goes on, you'll see by the time we get to game turn 5, all those other chits get put in the pool. So gradually it will increase the mean strength, and then you've got the Bs for the guard and the shock armies, and the As for the tank armies, which likewise get better as the game progresses. So it's got a lot to like, but I just don't think it ever really worked as published. You may agree to disagree, but I've done it enough times to be pretty confident that it needed a bit of attention. Anyway, hopefully I'll be able to give you some updates.